It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Carliss Baldwin. Professor Baldwin is the William L. White Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School. Her work has been published in a variety of leading journals, including the Strategic Management Journal, Organization Science, Management Science, Research Policy, and the Harvard Business Review. She has won a lot of awards for research. Most recently, she received a doctor honoris causa from the Technical University Munich. I think we have someone in the audience who worked there. And she was named the Distinguished Scholar of the Technology and Innovation Management Division of the Academy of Management. So yesterday I was fortunate during dinner to sit next to Professor Baldwin, and we had a broad discussion, which went from the pin factory of Adam Smith to Italian tailors. And this is not a suit designed by an Italian tailor, for the EOI doesn't pay that kind of wage. Steve Jobs and real options theory. So as you can realize already, Professor Baldwin's work is very wide, deep, and big think. The work of Professor Baldwin is mostly known for, I would say, a very a general and strong intuition, which is that design has an influence on firm strategy, platforms, and business ecosystems. And this idea lives in a book that she wrote a few years ago with Kim Clark. The title of the book is Design Rules. And the additional words in the title are the power of modularity, a concept that we heard about yesterday in the presentation of Professor Destrel and Narouche. And so that book describes how modularity has enabled the growth and success of large firms in today's economy. The good news for us is that there is a sequel, there is another design rules in the making. Actually, it's made and it's about to be published. So we're going to have Design Rules Volume 2. And I understand that the title now is Design Rules Volume 2, How Technology Shapes Organization. So this is absolutely spot on for the topic of the conference, and I'm sure the book will be a huge hit. We will probably send you an invitation at the DCI to give a book talk or come and talk more about the insights in the book. So we met last year at the Giovanni Dozzi big, I don't know how to call that, fest with David and Connie and others. And I was there with Bo Hayden. We didn't know each other, and I was listening to your presentation, and at some point the presentation moves into a discussion of Google's exclusive dealing arrangements with browsers and Apple, and I thought this is very interesting. And this is exactly the kind of topics that we at the DCI work on. Antitrust, industrial and innovation policy we want to discuss with a broader lens. So we are extremely happy because we think your work is very relevant to what we are doing, to broaden the perspective and learn from what people in other fields know about these practices and these strategies. So we are very honored to have you here, Carliss, and we look forward to learning from you in the next minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. If I move, so if I should stray and you can't hear me, if someone in the back of the room would just wave. Thank you, Carla. Okay, I'm very, very honored to be here. Oh dear, that's not the title slide. Well, I'm going to start. There is a title slide somewhere, but I'm going to start where Alexandra and Pierre left off, who are over there, And I changed the front end a little bit because they gave me such a great jumping off point with ecosystems. So I'm going to explain dynamic competition in platform ecosystems via a theory of bottlenecks. So that was what was on the title slide. And I need to start with definitions. So platform ecosystems, let's do ecosystems first. What determines the boundaries of firms and ecosystems? So there was a little bit of discussion of that yesterday, I thought very cogent. And I want to introduce a concept called the spectrum of complementarity. We heard a little bit yesterday about complementarity, but I want to take it a little bit beyond where it's been left in the strategy literature with the work of Jacobides, Senamo, and Gavere is the source document for many of the strategy fields analyses. Complementarity, one thing makes another thing more valuable. It's a simple idea. It's one that is almost absent in economics. There are very little analysis in the field of strict economics of complementarity. Milgram and Roberts is the big exception, and I build on their work. So supermodularity is this idea that one thing makes another thing more valuable. Milgram and Roberts gave a deep analysis of it in 3 papers in 80, 84, and 85, and then Jacobides, Senamo, and Gavere picked up on the concept in their path-breaking article in 2018. But I want to, I want to introduce a new piece to this theory called the complementary surplus, which is a way of measuring complementarity. So this is a diagram of two, so V0 is the starting point. That's, you have 2 objects, neither of them are there, V0, 0. V1, 0, you have one of the two. V0, 1, you have the other of the two. Those are the 2 axes. But if you have both of them, the sum of their value, there's supposed to be a pointer, yeah. The sum of their value is shown by that horizontal line. That's the value of the 2 things separated, but if you bring them together, the value of the 2 together is greater than the sum of their separate values, and you have this complementary surplus. The important thing about this diagram, which is straight out of Milgram and Roberts' 1985, is that this degree of complementarity is a continuous variable. Whereas in past work in strategy, it's a categorical variable. But you buy some real traction by making it continuous or at least ordered. So that's the complementary surplus. And I want to say at the top, if there's no complementary surplus, no complementarity. As you come down, you have weak complementarity, some, but not a lot. Then you have semi-strong complementarity. Then you have strong complementarity. And super strong complementarity is the 2 things are worthless unless they come together. So that's the spectrum. I want to say that economic forces acting on organizations will drive you one way or the other towards stronger or weaker complementarity. So by analogy with Newtonian physics, centripetal forces will increase complementarity, driving activities together, and centrifugal forces will decrease complementarity, driving activities apart. And I recommend not to take notes. If you want copies of these slides, just send me an email. Happy to send them out. So the centripetal forces out there are interdependence and synchronization. That goes back to Al Chandler. Hard to observe effort, Jensen and Meckling. Agency, basically, is another thing that drives you to combine and observe. And then Williamson, co-specialized investments. So investments that need to work together, that also drives you to higher levels of complementarity and coordination. Centrifugal forces, a really important one, dispersed knowledge and diverse preference. This is famously captured by a quote by Bill Joy. Not all smart people work for you, and therefore you need to look outside. This is the foundation of open innovation, and you need to look outside the boundaries of your firm for some resources because some people don't want to work for you. Modularity is another centrifugal force that allows you to separate things, and network effects, the idea that, bringing in more people increases the value of whatever the activity is, and that drives you to look outside and at the network. So what I want to propose is at the very top, where there is no need for direct coordination because the complementary surplus is very low, you have independent firms. No need for direct coordination. As you come down the spectrum, if you go all the way to the bottom, down here, you have single firm control because coordination is so valuable. You can't afford to not have it. And often it needs to be very timely. So you need to make things work. You don't have a lot of time to make it happen. So you'll have unified governance, direct authority, hierarchy, all the famous properties of Chandlerian firms. Now in the middle is where you have a balance of these forces, some driving you apart, some pushing you together, and that's when ecosystems shine. Because ecosystems allow you to do, as Alexandra and Pierre discussed yesterday when they talked about the hub, they allow you to do more. Now, I would put prices as a means of coordination. Hayek made that point long ago. But the other means are bilateral contracts, multilateral negotiations, systems integrators, and platforms. So those are all various mechanisms that can be used to go beyond, without single firm control, without authority, without hierarchy, you can still achieve agreements and coordination and consistent action across firms. So this just summarizes it. You have the spectrum of complementarity across the top. You have the forces, centripetal dominate, centrifugal dominate, and balance in the middle. And then you have the prediction of what forms of organization are best suited to that degree of complementarity. And that graph from Milgram and Roberts can be generalized to n dimensions. Doesn't make a very good picture, but it can be. And so you can measure a complementary surplus for any number of complementary assets. Next definition, platforms are next. What is a platform? In my definition, it's a set of technological components or activities that allow efficient creation and exercise of many options by producers and users. So it's a technological definition. A platform system is a way of setting up technology that supports options. Options are the right but not the obligation to take an action that's in your interest in the future. So platforms can be open or closed, and this is just a graphic representation. You have the platform over here. This is a symbol I use to signify essentiality. So the platform is essential. It either exists or doesn't. It's essential to the realizing the value of a whole lot of options. The platform needs some options, but any option can be taken away. You can combine options as you wish, and the platform and the options that you choose will have value together. And if you aggregate that, sum that over a lot of individuals, everybody will have their own portfolio. So it allows users to construct diverse, portfolios of options. That would be complex systems. Apps on your phone is a portfolio of options. Portfolios and bundles, so groceries in your cart is a portfolio of options. Stocks and bonds in your retirement account is a portfolio of options. Transactions, Uber rides, hotel stays, eBay purchases are all options. Messages, email, search results, friend messages, all of those are optional, and people construct their own system of use, as Eric von Hippel calls it, which is a portfolio of your options. We each choose the options we want. Open platforms have ecosystems by definition, because the whole idea is the platform looks beyond its own boundaries and tries to bring in complementors, contributors, and users. So the two together are components of the ecosystem of the platform. So these complementors and users are autonomous actors using the platform of their own free will. They don't have bosses with respect to their relationship to the platform. They're there because they see value in the option portfolios they can construct. The platform and each option may be broken up into their components. So this is where technology comes in. So there's the platform, a platform with options. Every option needs the platform. The platform is only valued for its options. So this is a platform hierarchy. Once you have this structure, you can start combining different pieces. So this is a shout out to Brian Arthur. The Nature of Technology talked about technological hierarchies. So here you see an optional sub-platform here that has its own platforms, but is an option of the higher level platform. So you can construct these hierarchies, and the dynamics, by the way, can be top-down or bottom-up. You can start with the sub-platform and create a bigger platform of which that is an option, or you can start with a high-level platform and somebody can add a sub-platform as an option. So it goes both ways. So bottlenecks are the last concept, and this slide I mangled, so here we go to the next. So platforms often have lots of, as I just showed you, you can have lots and lots of components at different levels, all interacting and creating complementary value. So we need a theory of bottlenecks to tell us where to focus our attention, because we can't pay attention to all parts of the platform ecosystem at once. So the concept of bottleneck is complex because there are two types. Inconveniently, and most people don't distinguish between them, which is enormously confusing because, as you'll see, the two types have almost opposite properties. So the two types, one type of bottleneck is a technical problem to be solved. So this is Rosenberg's idea, Thomas Hughes, he calls it a reverse salient. He someplace says it's basically, it's like a bottleneck, but I don't like the word bottleneck. All of operations management is about finding and fixing technical bottlenecks. Etheridge, Sendil talked about it in 27. Adner and Kapoor talk about bottlenecks in a 2010 paper. It's a bad thing. The technical bottleneck is a problem to be solved. At the other end, a point of monopoly control a source of rent. That would be a strategic bottleneck. So thank you, Stephen, for the citation to Arnold, 1940. I wasn't aware of it, but The Bottlenecks of Business, I think it was called. Thies, 1986, sort of, kind of in passing. Jacobides, Knudsen, and Augier, 2006. Pisano and Thies, definitely 2007. And it's a good thing if it's yours. So strategic bottlenecks, the relationship between the two types, when you solve a technical bottleneck, if you control access to the solution, then you can charge for its use and enjoy higher than normal returns. As long as the next best alternative isn't very good. That surplus that your bottleneck component controls access to, the higher it is, the better, the more valuable is your strategic bottleneck. So here's my tribute to Berkeley, because I think this is a picture of Berkeley, this Golden Gate Bridge taken from outside, facing not San Francisco, but the other side of the peninsula. The bridge is a technical bottleneck. It solves the problem of getting across that span of water. Before the Golden Gate Bridge, I think they had ferries that you could take to cross the strait. The bridge is a strategic bottleneck, a source of revenue. These are cars lined up to pay tolls. So the ability to tax the strategic bottleneck, they're willing to pay a lot in time and money to use the bottleneck. Notice that we now have a new technical bottleneck, which is traffic, which needs to be solved. So these things go round and round. All sources of, I maintain, all sources of economic rent are strategic bottlenecks. They're superior to all alternatives, and they're controlled by someone. So let's have some fun quickly. A superscript 0, I'm going to put a math equation on up. A superscript 0 means a design for the component does not exist. It is an indicator of a technical bottleneck. Will this platform system work? And this is just math. The value of the platform is there are 3 platform components, P1, P2, P3. There are a bunch of options, O1, O2, O3, et cetera. And as I said, a superscript 0 means the design doesn't exist. So my question for the room is, will this platform system work? I come from Harvard Business School, so I can cold call. So, will it work? I'm going to move away from the mic. Any volunteers? Because platform piece is 0, so whatever the options are worth doesn't matter, because they need the platform to come in. So how about this one? I see nods. Yeah, this one will work, because although this option doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. These other options and a complete platform allow this system to create value. So non-existence of options is not a problem for the system as a whole. Non-existence of a platform component is a problem, a technical bottleneck that needs to be solved. Now for strategic bottlenecks, I'm going going to say superscript star means a design where the component exists. The component exists, but it is unique. So that's a star. Superscript star X means the design is unique and owned by X, a profit-seeking company. So look at this system and tell me, first, will it work? Oh, okay, thank you, Carla. Okay, will this system work? I see a lot of nods, just shout it out. It will, and then the second question is, every platform component exists. Who claims the surplus? I'm sorry?
It's not determined. There's a bargaining problem between.
You have to yell.
There's a bargaining problem between 1 and 2.
Yes, there's bargaining problems. So they will split the surplus. Nash bargaining solution, some kind of solution to the bargaining game, but they will since both components are necessary, they must bargain for the surplus. And different institutional setups will split the surplus differently. So now look at this system. Who claims the surplus? Okay, so I'm sorry. This is where I mangled the slides again. So X and Y split the surplus on option 1. X can also claim the surplus created by all the other options because it doesn't have to share that surplus, and they're each valuable in their own right, except option 0, option N, which doesn't exist. So there's no surplus to be generated there. When it comes into existence, institutional rights about who owns what will determine who gets the rents from that option. So bottleneck dynamics, I want you to imagine one of those options getting large so that now everybody needs it. Everybody wants it. The component that everybody wants then moves into the platform and becomes a potential system-wide strategic bottleneck. And it might itself be a platform supporting other options. So there could be quite a lot of value tied up in this new platform component. And so this just shows the new option, the option 1 controlled by Y, itself a platform for all these other options, and there are other options out here. Oh, shit. Sorry. So Y is now a threat to X, because Y can split the platform's rents, or Y can claim part of the platform's rents. So X might foresee the threat and move first. This brings us to competition policy, or brings us to case 1. Microsoft, this is 1989, 1990, Microsoft productivity applications, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. This is a case of partial platform envelopment. Platform envelopment is a concept pioneered by Eisenman, Parker, and Van Alstyne in 2011. The platform sponsor integrates a version of the optional component with other optional components. That's why it's partial, demodularizes that part of the system. The combination offers greater function. It's important. The combination has to offer greater functionality than the 3 things separately. There has to be a complementary surplus from bringing the things together. The components then become semi-strong complements. Once upon a time, in the late 80s, there were 3 dominant companies making productivity software for IBM PCs. IBM PCs were the dominant platform at the time. They were Lotus 123, made spreadsheets. WordPerfect 3.0 did word processing, made a word processor. And Harvard Graphics, I've got a squiggle there because presentation software was in its infancy, but Harvard Graphics was the premier presentation software company. Things to know, none of these applications had a graphical user interface, and they were incompatible. So there were 3 separate code bases, different architectures, no APIs. However, and Microsoft controlled the PC's operating system and shared its rents with Intel. Microsoft, first they had to learn how to make GUIs. They did that from Apple. They learned it from Apple. They created Windows, which was a GUI overlaid on their DOS software system. Version 2 of Windows was released in 1985. There's a lot of indirect evidence here for the existence of capabilities because they couldn't do it all at once. Something prevented them, something delayed them from getting that software out, the GUI software out right away, and the integrated software. They also created, one of the ways they learned about GUIs was they created productivity software for the Macintosh. And they introduced that first. So they introduced Office for Macintosh in 1989 and Office for Windows in 1990. It was a spreadsheet, Excel, the word processor Word, and the presentation software PowerPoint. They were cut and paste compatible, so you could take something from one and paste it into the other. And the 3-in-1 bundle was discounted by 30% versus a separate purchases. But you know, if you were wedded to if you were wedded to your spreadsheet program, you could still have it. You didn't have to purchase Microsoft's. So the bundle quickly reached 85 to 90% of all 3 markets. Not entirely always as a bundle. There were people who split their options, but this was dynamic competition at its best, I think. Office greatly enhanced the functionality of the IBM PC through 2 factors, the GUI and interoperability. The incumbents could not have done the same. Even if they'd merged, they would need to have discarded the existing code bases, integrate their teams or fire their teams because their teams are tied to the old stuff. Easier to start from scratch. I think it's a dynamic capability to know when to start from scratch. David is nodding. User options were not taken away. They could vote with their feet, and they did, but they could still maintain their relationship with the old software. But now we have case 2, which I think many of you have heard of, Microsoft versus Netscape, the browser wars. So this was full platform envelopment. What I just showed you was partial platform envelopment. Microsoft was totally unprepared for the rise of the internet in 1995. Completely blindsided. Netscape, a startup, introduced Navigator in early 1995, just as the web was taking off. The web was like a rocket. The web and Navigator, importantly, were platform independent. They ran everywhere. You didn't need to have an IBM PC to use the web and to run Navigator. Netscape developed application programming interfaces, which we take for granted now. They were kind of a new thing, and Netscape used them big time. And they used their APIs to attract web page designers and webmasters, and so created an ecosystem around Navigator. This is combinatorial modularity, which is one step up from the platform simple modularity that I was showing you. And this is discussed in a paper by et al., 2022, and a new book by Fishman and McLarty, 2024. By mid-1995, introduced early 1995, it's a small market but growing very fast. Navigator had 70% of the market, and all the other browsers were declining. Gates called the internet a tidal wave in June of 1995, declared internet interoperability Microsoft's top priority, and began an accelerated development program, set the goal of 30% market share for a Microsoft browser. Internet Explorer was released 14 months later. Another example of of capabilities, Bill Gates had the, sensing, seizing, but he had to do the transformation. That took 14 months because they had no people on board at Microsoft at the time. They had to bring in a new team of guys who understood the internet and the web and put them to work at creating a browser. Netscape wasn't sharing its code, so they had to do it from scratch, and it took a while. 14 months is actually pretty good execution for de novo software development for when you've got a product you don't understand. Their strategy for IE was very different from Office. Office components were sold separately from each other and from Windows. IE code was intermingled with the Windows code, so there was no option to uninstall. And this wasn't necessary because there was a version of IE published for Macintosh. So this wasn't technically necessary, but they did it. The IE was made the gateway to the Microsoft help system. So if you wanted any online help, which was a new idea but important, you had to use IE. The original equipment manufacturers, that's like Compaq, guys making the computers and installing the basic software, if they tried to remove the IE icons from the Windows desktop or added their own software, they would have their licenses revoked. Compaq tried to do that. Microsoft said, your license, 30 days or something, and Compaq backed down. Is this tying? I think you guys are the experts on that. Netscape lost the war. August 1996, Navigator's market share was at 70%. Internet Explorer was 3.0 was released. Remember, this is a very explosive market, so the underlying growth is huge. January 1997, so that's 5-6 months later, IE share is at 30%, which was Gates's goal. May, June 1998, that's a year later, IE shares at 50%. The Department of Justice filed US versus Microsoft suit, and Netscape released Navigator code as open source software. So they said, basically, we're not in this business anymore. Technical interdependence lay at the heart of Microsoft's antitrust defense. Tying is illegal. Functional interdependency is not illegal. The technology made me do it. Well, it's more like the lawyers made me do it, I think is closer to the truth. They knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to put the bundle together so that no one could escape it. So in 2003, IE's share was 95% of the market. But that year, a new open source browser, Firefox, was introduced, created by the same team that created Navigator. So they went open source. We're going to see this open source ploy again. This part of the talk is pity the poor platforms, because I'm going to argue that they're just trying to solve the problems that they face. They have problems, and the big problem for a lot of the so-called exchange platforms, the exchange platforms do transactions and they do social media, is low switching costs. Although you think of them as being very powerful, they're actually very, very vulnerable, because the essential service provided, unlike the service of an operating system, it's a transient service. So they match buyer or seller, they match sender, receiver, advertiser, and then that particular episode is over. And if another platform does better matches, users will go there. Getting to the airport in Boston on Friday, there was a lot of traffic. We usually use Uber. We called a Lyft guy. He was both an Uber and a Lyft driver, and told us lots of interesting things about the difference between the two. So if another platform does better, why stay loyal? So how do you increase switching costs? That's a big problem if you're one of these transient service platforms. Standards are like the gold standard of switching costs. If you can be setting standards, they become embedded or in code or in design or in user behavior. So you have to rewrite or recode everything if the standards change. That's kind of a yuck proposition. And that's why backward compatibility is such a big deal for software companies, because that means you don't have to rewrite all your code. Exchange platforms need to invest, so ergo, exchange platforms, and that's all the transaction and all the social media platforms, should invest in standards and APIs, because that's what gets embedded, is the standards and the APIs. So here's some data. This is thanks to Shiva Agrawal for this. It's data from 2008 to 2016. It's from her thesis, and she just listed, these are the red indicates, so on the very left-hand side is a list of the top 25 publishers of APIs. And the number of dependent applications, that's the number of places where that code, I'm going to yell. Number of places where that code is being used, number of places where the API is embedded, and then the check marks are, is the provider of the API a digital exchange platform? And you see, they're all of the big providers of API in the system, and this goes on, are themselves exchange platforms looking to increase switching costs. So pity the poor platforms. They have to go through all this trouble to get their APIs embedded in people's code so that they won't switch on them. So the value structure conclusion 2 is that visible instructions embedded in users' code and designs create strong ties binding users to particular platforms. They reinforce the strategic bottleneck provided by the speed and efficiency of the core process, because you're looking to these platforms, if it's a transient connection, you still want it fast and efficient and reliable. So there's a core process going on here that itself is a capability. This brings us to case 3, which Nicola mentioned, Google versus Apple. This is multiple rounds. I'll go quickly because I know I'm close to out of time. It's like the Albizzi and the Medici families in Florence. They have had a long-standing rivalry, and every once in a while someone gets killed, but they go on. round one, 2000 to 2008. From 85 to 2000, the chip operating system combination, think Windows and Intel, was the main strategic bottleneck in all computer systems from PCs to mainframes. So you might have different combinations in different platforms, but the chip plus the operating system was the main strategic bottleneck. If you controlled it, you controlled everything. Then came the internet and the World Wide Web, 1995, together with platform-independent protocols, which is, it happened to be called AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML was a combination of standards that if you use them, you could build an application that was platform independent, like Navigator ran on everything. You didn't have to have, it didn't depend on it being a Macintosh or it being Wintel, it ran on everything. Google used web apps to bypass Wintel and Macintosh operating systems. AJAX was a bunch of protocols, instructions, enabling fast page loads. And Gmail, Google News, Maps, Groups, they all used it. Ads could not be taxed. What this meant strategically is Google had a stream of revenue from its ads. The operating system and the chip manufacturer could not tax that revenue stream. It came to Google, and Google could get their stuff on anybody's computer without depending on the operating system or the chip. So round one goes to Google. It's a new platform, a new threat. Round two, 2008, Apple creates the iPhone and the App Store. Two new platforms. Mobile devices need native applications to achieve acceptable speed. So it's all about, in this case, the core process inside the handset. In order for it to work efficiently, your app has to already be on the device. So when you purchase an app at the App Store, you're basically downloading that code so that your device can run that app quickly and not make you wait. So again, it's all about core processes. Apple controlled access to the device and could also tax any in-app purchases because it ran the store. So notice that they had a platform to start with, and they added another platform, which was the App Store, which was an exchange platform. So they had a product platform based on standards that they owned, and now they had a store which controlled access to a lot of great functionality. And they could tax anything. So I want to say, in my book, there are 4 important types of platforms. There's standards-based, logistical, transaction, and communication. So that's just a useful way to break them down. Operating system, the iPhone manufacturing and distribution was controlled by Apple. The iTunes Store and the App Store, 2 transaction platforms. And mail and message apps and customer reviews were all communication platforms. So we're now seeing the emergence of a new kind of platform whose strategic bottlenecks are not concentrated in one part, but require multiple platforms to execute. So it's like a castle on a high hill. I'm thinking of our surroundings, surrounded by a moat with a drawbridge. And Google could not pierce these combined defenses. So Google pays Apple for access to the iPhone universe, to the tune of, to be the default search engine on the iPhone. It also pays the Mozilla Foundation to be default on Firefox, the default search application. Payments to Apple are on the order of $10 billion a year, and the payments to Firefox are about 500 million. So the estimated total payments are about 10 billion a year. This is not small change. So US versus Google may be based on this fact, not sure. But round 2 definitely goes to Apple, because they've created a castle on a hill with defenses. Round 3, why have your own mobile phone? Why not have your own mobile phone ecosystem? Said Google. 2007, before the iPhone intro, Google introduced Android, an open source mobile operating system. And they nurtured something called the Open Handset Alliance, was a consortium of handset makers. That alliance converged on Android, which they couldn't, so each of them had their own open mobile operating system, and they each defended it. Nokia was very prominent here, but Android was open source, so they didn't feel threatened by it. And so Android became Google's greener pasture. And this is just, you can see the top line is share goes to Android. The lion's share of this market goes to Android, but Android itself is divided into Google Android and Chinese Android. They're not the same, and the Chinese Android is taking the top block, the difference between this line and the very top line, that's Chinese Android. I apologize for not being hearable. The profits, however, are in the bottom part, and round 3 is a tie. Apple and Google split the market based on 2 different operating systems. So bringing things full circle, I've tried to demonstrate a new approach to innovation, knowledge, management, and strategy that works on complex digital product systems. It's rooted in the value structure of technologies. That's the drawings I had at the beginning of the platform and the options and the hierarchies. If you map those structures and look for the bottlenecks, you will know where to pay attention. My premise is that we need theories that recognize complementarities in complex technical systems. We don't have a lot of those tools, in my opinion. And I hope you will find some of these ideas useful in your own work. So in this case, this is Google's control of other platforms, and the platforms they control reinforce each other. So it's the big game is multiple strategic bottlenecks. And my question is this the new normal? I kind of think it is, but it's taken an hour to get to this point of just understanding a simple platform system, not a combination of platforms designed to be complementary. So, and can we fit generative AI and large language models into this framework? That completely remains to be seen. Anyway, thank you for your time and attention.
So thanks, Carliss, for the very nice keynote. And what I gather from this, you talked about the Medici and the rivalry. I like to analogize the big tech firms to the families in Game of Thrones for a more modern reference.
Yes.
And I often said that Apple are the Lannisters. And the question is, who's Google in that? But what's interesting I mean, amongst the many interesting things that you showed us here is that, you know, we also would like to think of these games as repeated. And focusing one antitrust case on a deal between Apple and Google misses the big picture of the strategic interactions in the long term. So, and the puzzle actually that it's interesting that Google is condemned for abuse of dominance or monopolization when it is the one paying Apple for something, which is quite a weird thing for a monopolist to do, I would say. But so we have maybe 5 minutes for question and answers with the room. No more, but yeah, I can see already some hands. Thank you.
Yes, Nicola.
So I think Pinar has a question and then Fausto.
Okay.
Thank you for this fascinating talk. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on the relation between the number of APIs you showed on that slide and switching costs, because you got to the point about the number of APIs from the point about trying to increase switching costs. From a competition point of view, unless I'm misunderstanding something else, we see the larger the number of APIs, the higher the interoperability. And from a competition perspective, that's a good thing. So we have tools like the DMA trying to increase interoperability. But I think the point you're making is actually the large number of APIs can also signify higher switching costs for consumers, which would be a bad thing from a competition perspective.
From a technological perspective, an API is access to code. The code sometimes runs native, sometimes runs in the cloud. But what's important is programmers use APIs as a shortcut. They embed them in their code. So they become part of somebody's program, just like, you know, lines of C++. So if your API is in someone's code, then it becomes very expensive to take it out. And you know, they charge you for the APIs. I've not seen any financial statements, but I've heard that APIs are an important source of revenue for the people who supply them. That you don't use APIs for free. But it's not something I'm aware of any real research. I mean, this is an opportunity. They're starting, as I said, Fishman and McLarty just wrote a book, which I recommend highly. There's some scholarly work out there, but not as much as I think there should be.
As another question, I think Fausto had a question. Audrey, okay, and Alex. So we'll take the 3 questions in a row very quickly. Fausto, Audrey, and Alex.
Thank you for the fascinating presentation. My question would be related to the notion of systemic innovation. So do you think that there is a relationship between the value structure of an ecosystem or a platform, including the number of bottlenecks, and its resiliency and its ability to react to changing circumstances? Yeah, that would be it.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Audrey Skodzauer-Fradzeny from Qualcomm. Thank you for your presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. One question I wanted to ask you at the end, the last slide, can we expect you to tell us a little bit more on how you see the future, especially on Gen AI? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for this presentation. So the 2 cases you mentioned were cases where the Department of Justice have intervened or are intervening. Do you think this intervention is justified and help the market to change all the time, or it would be better to leave it to technology and in fact the intervention were either useless or even detrimental?
Okay, maybe I'll take it in reverse order. I have no view on policy. That's your range. I had to study for this talk about competition policy. So you know, I leave it to you to draw the policy implications and the policy arguments. To the second, how do I see the future? Again, through a cloudy, through a cloudy looking glass, through a cloudy glass. I can see some dynamics at work. This dynamic of, multiple complementary platforms being used to entrench a position. That seems to be a pattern. Will this entrench? So this gets to the question of resiliency. Will this be the new normal, and are we in, who said 10 years of competition and 100 years of oligopoly? And are we in that state? Are we looking forward to permanence of the big five or the big tech companies? I don't know, because most of the radical new technologies that came along were not anticipated, even as they were being worked on. I mean, people designing the internet and the web were very, very excited about its potential. The rest of the world was kind of, who knew? And then exploded in 1995. And suddenly no one can afford, Bill Gates, taken aback, says, it's a tidal wave. I can't stop it. So I don't know if there's a new tidal wave out there. The companies are behaving as if Gen AI is a potential tidal wave. I'm not sure. I see reasons, but hey, one could have doubted the internet, and that would have been a very bad bet. So I don't bet. Just try to understand.
Okay, that's very wise to remind us of the division of labor between, as we spoke yesterday, between the policy people and the strategy people. I think Carliss deserves another round of applause.